This is The Other 51, a podcast about writing with me, Brian Moritz. This week, I'm joined by Cameron Hurst, a sports writer in Jamestown, New York, and a recent graduate of St. Bonaventure University. Before we get to any important journalism topics, I think we need to talk about I Love Lucie a little bit here.
I'm in the perfect place to do so, seeing as though I'm in the place where it happened.
In her hometown. Yeah, I think that's one of the first things we connected over online was I Love Lucie. My daughter, who last year had a big obsession with I Love Lucie. It's still there, but she's 9, so things come and go. Right.
Yeah,
and you're a Jamestown, New York native. You're living there right now, and that's where she was born. That's her hometown.
Yeah, you can't walk about a mile without seeing something reminiscent of the fact that Lucie was born here. I was just talking to my grandmother the other day, and apparently years ago I had a relative that was. So the local scandal is Lucie dated kind of like a gangster when she was in Jamestown before she got off and away like a bootlegger. And I guess I had a cousin who was also a bootlegger at the time, and they were all in cahoots before she left for Hollywood. And so that was kind of cool to find out. I just found this out now.
That's fantastic.
So yeah, my family has been here forever, and we had our family business on my mom's side really came out of prohibition. It became a restaurant supply shop, but it began on supplying beer to the local speakeasies. So it was
no way. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's really cool. It's really cool. I always liked hearing stories from my grandpa about that time. And then my grandmother was just pulling out all these old newspaper clippings the other day, and she pulled out a clipping from when the store closed, and the store closed when I was born in '98. And it says in this article, right around, after Paul Mastretta, the founder, passed away, a diary was found in the safe full of incriminating stuff, but relaying the fact that Mastretta was a close friend of Lucille Ball's while she was still in Jamestown. And I said, Mimi, why would you allow the newspaper to print anything about the fact that you guys had an incriminating diary? I just don't really understand where that came from. But but it's pretty cool. I mean, Jamestown it's exciting right now with the National Comedy Center and the presence of Lucie. It really, I think we're seeing here what she really wanted the whole time, which was her city to be promoted, not because of her, but because of the spirit and what her work did in promoting comedy.
Right.
So it's really exciting.
And so that before we get back to Lucie, just that your story reminded me of it was Jim Malero, the late sports writer at the Atlanta Times-Herald, who I worked with, and he would tell this story because for those of you who don't know, the southern tier of New York, Olean, Jamestown, there was because of the railroads and a lot of the industry, there was a lot of prohibition activity in that area for such a small kind of secluded area. And the story goes, I want to say it was Jim's grandmother, but I'm probably getting this wrong. But some older family member of his passed away, and the story goes that they didn't stay for the funeral, but there were some really big Cadillacs that pulled up to the house to pay the respects at some point, and all the families came up or sent delegations up to pay their respects, and not in public, of course, but they were seen. So and that's awesome. And you also in Lucie, you performed when the Lucie Museum opened?
So this is an unbelievable story, but I don't know. I think it was because I was hanging around my grandparents as a kid, and I'm the youngest by a lot, like 16 and 13 years. And so I was always around, older people and my grandparents. And I went with my grandpa one day to the Desi Studios had just opened. It was then the Desi Playhouse, but there was also a gift shop right across the street before they just left it inside the museums. And I was just rattling off the Vitameatavegamin speech because I had watched the show every day as a 7-year-old. and had committed that to memory. And it just so happened that day in the gift shop was the benefactor who had just purchased all of the the 50th anniversary tour sets and had donated them to Jamestown to be what is now Desi Studios. So she hears me doing this, and she comes up to my grandpa and I, and my grandpa's like, "Who is this stranger?" she introduces her she introduces herself as, "Hi, my name's Mary Rappaport. I am on the board of directors of Lucille Ball Desi Arnez Museum, and just my husband and I." Her husband is a professor, I'm pretty sure is now a retired professor, but is a professor emeritus at UB, English professor. And we just purchased all of these sets, and and we actually just purchased Lucie's house in Celeron. I'm actually about to head there now. Would you like to join me? And I could show you. You sound, this is so cool that you're so dedicated, so young. And I was like, yeah, I'd love to do this. And my grandpa's just like, what is going on? And so, long story short, when it came time for like the grand opening to happen, I got invited. I got out of school for the day. I was 7 years old. I got out of school for the day, got invited to the grand opening. I was told nothing about what I was going for, except my mom and I got there. Mary Rappaport, who's still a really good friend, takes us with, takes me away. She goes, "Okay, we'll see you after." And Mary says to me that I am going to recite the Vitameatavegamin speech at this grand opening, which is being attended by Lucie's daughter, Lucie Arnez. So here I am, 7 years old. I've got a tie on, like I dressed to the nines. I'm getting shout outs from the mayor, from the county executive, from Kathy Young, the state senator was there. I mean, it was just bizarre. And then they let me actually take the scissors and cut the ribbon. I've been looking for the video for so long. We have it here somewhere, but we just don't have a VHS anymore. And so I've got to find it and get it transferred, because that's something that has to be preserved, I have to see it, and then we'll see if it needs to be preserved or if it needs to be burned.
So the question is, publicly, did you do the sober and the drunk version of it? The drunk version, or was it both? Okay.
I did the sober version. I wasn't allowed to do the drunk version.
Because there's nothing better than my kid doing the drunk. She can do both, but doing the drunk version is just it's the best. Can you do it right now? Can you still do it?
Oh God, I don't think I have it as much to memory anymore as I once did. I wish I could say I did, and I would have been happy to do it.
That's all right. So, all right, enough Lucy talk. We could also talk West Wing, but we're actually going to skew back to writing and journalism here. First of all, congratulations on your graduation within the past month from St. Bonaventure.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
The two Bona guys are going to get a lot of Bona talk here. Just deal with it. They're used to it. I've had Vac on here. We've done this before. And I really wanted to talk to someone who's just graduated college with a journalism degree, just to kind of get a sense of what it's like being a young journalist and a young reporter going into this field now in 2020. Because I went into it in 1999 before you even knew Lucy was a thing. Right. But it's a whole different generation. So I guess starting off, like what got you interested in journalism in the first place before you even got to college?
Well, I was thinking about this, and I'm trying to pinpoint when I actually was interested. And I loved to write. I had really good English teachers all throughout middle and really into high school that, encouraged writing and, were diligent in making us be able to communicate. And at the same time, in the 8th grade, my homeroom teacher was talking about her daughter was interested in communications and had just gotten accepted into Newhouse. Now, I didn't realize how prestigious that was at the time. But, she was interested in, and, was a really good writer. And I was like, yeah, maybe this is something I want to do. Because at that point, I had just been a theater kid at that point. I was just doing musicals and music. And, I didn't think that was going to be a career. Not to disparage anyone from doing that. I just didn't really, I loved doing it as a hobby. It wasn't what I wanted to do moving forward. So I got into, I just started writing, really working on my writing skills. And I was always reading the newspaper, and I was always sitting down watching the evening news with my dad. And I loved, the ambiance of watching Dan Rather or Bob Schieffer, or even watching old Walter Cronkite clips. And, and I loved reading the newspaper. And we are lucky here. Scott Kinberg is our local sports editor. And he's really one of the best storytellers I know. I mean, he knows how to really get at the heart of a story, and I grew up reading him. And when I got into 10th grade, the summer before my 10th grade year, I reached out to him just on a whim, and I said, I'm interested in communications and journalism, and I'd love to shadow you. Do you have any internship opportunities available at the paper? And he responded back and said, we unfortunately don't have an internship program, but I'm always happy to help, an aspiring, somebody who wants to do this. So I started shadowing him at different high school games, at, learning how to take pictures, and just kind of trying to mock my writing style after his a little bit. I finally got to the point where 2 months in, I was like, okay, I think I really want to, write something now rather than just, just follow you along. And I pitched him a story, and I wrote it, and he goes, Cam, this is really good. It's a shame my high school didn't have a school newspaper, and that's something, I've always encouraged high schools, that I wish we had one. But Scott encouraged me to start a blog just writing about my high school sports. And he would get me the credential. I'd be able to go with him to the different football games and basketball games and just start a blog. So I did, and it was The Rowdy Raider. And over the course of my high school career, it gained a lot of views. And so it was kind of from there I was writing, an advanced story, a recap story, taking my own pictures, writing columns, writing on news that was happening. I mean, I started right into it, and I loved it. And I was fortunate too. Our high school was really good at the time. We won state championship the next year, so I was able to go all the way to the Carrier Dome with him, and people were reading, and I look back at my analytics, and I wish I had those analytics out about what I was getting. And so I was really I wanted to get into it, and Scott was great. And by the time the blog had gotten somewhat good, he offered me an opportunity to be a stringer at the Post Journal to actually get paid. and right from there, I've been doing it ever since, and I love it. I love being able to, I love being able to take an event and put it into my perspective, and hope that people are able to see it through the way I see it. And I've always, I've listened to your podcast, and I always hear, so many of your guests say the same thing. There's something daunting about the blank screen, but there's something exciting about it at the same time. And I love being able to take what's in my head and, put it down on the paper.
And so you got to college, and how'd you pick Bonaventure? Because Bonaventure, for those of you who don't know, upstate New York, it's about 45 minutes from Jamestown or so, close-ish.
45, 50. No matter how fast or how slow I go, it always ends up being 50 minutes. I can't get it any quicker or any slower. So I ended up picking Bonas because, I'll be honest, it wasn't my first choice. I took it for granted, and it was because I really didn't know about the school. I took it for granted because it was 45 minutes away, and the only time I was getting on 86 East was to go to New York City, and that was we weren't stopping along the way. And so I took for granted what was going on, at St. Bonaventure. My dream was to always go to Syracuse, and I worked and when I didn't get accepted into Newhouse, I was disappointed, and I was still going to go, and my parents were going to support me in whatever way I wanted to go. But I had been reminded a year earlier, my grandfather, who I mentioned, who was really like my best friend, had passed away, and his best friend that he was high school basketball rivals against, and they didn't reconnect for years and years and years, was a guy named Carl Saglabin, who played at Bonas years ago under Eddie Donovan and Eddie Melvin. Like, he played in the 50s, and he came up to me at my grandpa's funeral. I hadn't seen him in years, and he goes, "Where are you going to college?" And I, it's just like right now. It's that question was, what are you doing now that you're graduated? The question now. I said, I want to go to Syracuse. He goes, no, you're wrong. You're no, you're wrong. I said, why? You want me to go to Bonaventure? And he goes, it's going to be the best 4 years of your life. You need to go to Bonaventure. And I said, I don't know, SAG, it's too close. It's I want a bigger school. It's too small of a school. And a year later, it was like it was a sign. I look for signs like that all the time. But I got accepted. I applied to Bonas on my birthday. And, in light of Scott had taken me to work a high school basketball game there at the Riley Center. And I really was kind of like, wow, this is really nice for just being so close. And I applied, a couple days later on my birthday, and I got accepted the day before the 1 year anniversary of my grandfather's passing. So I kind of thought that was a sign that, okay, I think this is where I want to go. And I went and visited, and the professor that I ended up sitting down with was Denny Wilkins. And he looked at me and said, he leaned back in his chair and, put his feet up on his desk. And my mom was looking at me with a very weird look. And he looked at me and he said, I know what we can offer you. What can you offer us? And I said, and Denny, so that's not at all a surprising question. But I just came back at him, and I can't even remember what I said. I was so nervous. But I think I must have impressed him enough. And I was impressed that a professor was going to ask me that, and so Bonas was it, and it was great.
Yeah, Denny stories. You don't even know. You don't even know how much he has mellowed. So I had him I was his first class. Oh, I was a sophomore when he started. You guys don't even know. You kids don't even know.
I keep hearing this, and it's just, I don't know. It's still scary.
I'm going to have him on at some point. He is like the ultimate in intimidating, scary. You kind of hate him when you have him, but once you're done with him, you realize he's the best. And just
no doubt. He's been the single most. I've gone to his office so many times with just life questions rather than journalism questions, and there is just something to his wisdom that you can't even describe.
Right. So one thing I found interesting, I was looking over your website, which will be in show notes, and my God, have you done some stuff. I mean that as a compliment. I mean, the variety of stuff you have on there is insane.
Thank you.
But you worked for Greater Olean, the Tap Into site.
Yes.
And it's an interesting project because it's a professional site that's students monitored by a professor, student staffed, I should say. How did you get connected there instead of working at the kind of more traditional student media?
Well, we're required at Bonas to take. There's no capstone anymore. So rather than a capstone, we take 2 semesters worth of an experiential course. That could be SBU TV, that could be the sports truck, that could be, or it could be journalist workshop, which I opted to take. The journalists workshop course oversees Tap Into Greater Olean. Like you said, Dr. Rich and Professor Ann Lee, husband and wife, run and monitor the site. And I just got involved with it because I was taking the course. One of my stories as a sophomore from JMC 202 at Bonas, which is feature writing and whatnot, which you take with Denny. He thought was good enough to be published, so he recommended me to the Lees. I wrote a story it was right when the clerical abuse scandal was just starting, and Bishop Richard Malone had opted to release 42 names of substantiated claims against clergy. And I was just getting a campus reaction, Olean reaction, and he said, well, why don't you send this to Dr. and Professor Lee? They, would probably be happy to run it in TAP. And so I did. And then that was really the only thing I had done in the meantime. I had taken a couple photos here and there, but because I was kind of on pace to graduate early, typically you have to take this course. You take this course as a junior, fall, spring. Because I was also a music major, I was taking the course. There was one of my music required courses that wasn't going to be offered again that forced me to wait a semester. And then I picked up the course a year ago, like tomorrow, and started writing for them. And that's a great experience. Rich and Ann Lee are just phenomenal people. And they treat it as if it's a working newsroom. And, I approached it as if I was going to work every day, and we were assigned. There's just so many different things that they wanted to teach. We had weekly tasks. Somebody was doing a podcast. Somebody was doing sports. Somebody was doing general assignment, and then writing a column. All kinds of meet the leader stories, like somebody in the community. And then and then at the same time, we were all responsible for overseeing the email account and uploading press releases to the area. And in the time since I've been at Bonas, it really has established itself as a premier news source, especially with the Times Herald is making cuts left and right, and it's a really, really cool concept, and it's great, and it's great experience for students too.
Right. And that Meet the Leaders thing, that's actually, I think, where even before the I Love Lucy stuff, where I first kind of got familiar with your work. You wrote a column on Chuck Pollock, my former boss at the Times Herald, best boss, best sports editor in the country by far.
Yes.
And it was a wonderful piece. I'm looking at it too, at the work you've done for some of the work for the Tap Into site. And you did a lot of coverage of that clerical abuse scandal with the Buffalo Diocese and the reaction at Bonaventure and things when Bishop Malone resigned and all of that. And I'm wondering, you're young. You're still in college. What was that experience like? You're Catholic. What was that experience like covering that as a reporter? And you're following the great coverage in the Buffalo News and Charlie Speck up at Channel 7. I think I got that right.
Yep.
And Bonograd too. All of this. What was that experience like for you? Because this is much bigger than Bonas in the NCAA tournament or anything like that.
Absolutely.
I mean, so kind of walk me through what was that like writing about this and covering it for you.
Oh man, that was exciting, at the same time horrifying, at the same time I'm trying to find the other verb, but that was difficult as a Catholic to, I would have followed the story regardless, whether or not I was assigned, to do so. I was just, I don't want to say lucky, but I was fortunate that I was able to follow it a lot closer once, Bonas kind of got involved in it. And it was, it was just really tough as a Catholic to hear all that was coming out. I mean, Charlie's reporting is what did it, and same with Jay Tokaz at the Buffalo News. But it really got real for me when one of my childhood priests was named not as an offender, but as somebody who was removed and kind of taken away under the radar because something had happened. And that's when I was like, this is really just, I mean, that night I was just so shaken by the fact, this is the guy that gave me my first Holy Communion. And I had no idea about this. No one had any idea about this. There was always murmurs, but, now Charlie's naming him in the report. So I don't know, I kind of, dedicated myself to just keeping on it. And things got tight there at the end. Well, things got really tight when I started to really get back onto it from when I wrote that first story, was when Bonaventure's president, Dr. Dennis Shapiro, came out and called for the bishop's resignation. And I had many a conversation with Dr. Shapiro. He's a great guy, and I really love what he's doing at Bonas. But besides the fact he's a very devout Catholic, and I knew just from my own conversation, our own conversations about faith and, you know, the structure of the diocese. I mean, he himself, he was born and raised, went to Bishop Timon, the whole deal. And I knew that was hard for him to do because how, a young, a born and bred Catholic, man calling for the sitting bishop's resignation as president of of one of its most prominent universities. That's when you know that there's a problem.
That's a big deal when that happens. That is not just a little thing. That's a big deal.
No, it's a huge deal, and especially knowing him. And so, I mean, I got to give credit to the BV, the Bonaventure, and Megan Hall and Sean Mickey were the ones that at Bona's that really got him to go on the record and say, Bishop Malone owes it to this diocese to step away from his duties, paraphrasing. And then Charlie got it that night and it was on the news. And I just wrote it. I sat down that night and I was so moved by what had happened that I just sat and I wrote a column. And I wrote that, I felt as though, Dr. DiPrio was justified. And that's when my opinion kind of shifted too, that there was so much oversight that you are only robbing this diocese of the opportunity to heal by staying in. And that's, like I said, that was very editorial, and that was my column and opinion. But that got a lot of traction, and I think from there on in, once Canisius' president turned on him, once you were getting reports every day that there were so many people, the movement to restore trust that he had organized to be the fact finding mission and do what its name intended. Turned on him. It was just really staggering to watch that fall apart. And it was my last week at school, my last week of classes. 2 weeks earlier, there had been a murder in Clarksville, right in Bona's backyard, that I was out to with a couple of our Tap Into students. And then this last week of classes, I had my senior capstone music recital on Friday. We had gotten word that the resignation was going to happen that week on Monday. And so I anticipated the fact that Wednesday was going to be the day, because based off of Charlie's reporting, that's when the Vatican makes its resignation announcements. Any type of personnel movement was Wednesday morning. So I kind of did my research on Tuesday night. This was as I was preparing to do this recital, which was just pure insanity. What happened my last semester upon it. And I went and I wanted to check the Vatican news briefing to see, what was going to happen when this would come across. So I had an alarm set for 5:45 and then for 6 a.m. The morning of. And I had put the Vatican news briefing on my, push notifications. And I woke up right at 6. And the first thing I saw on my phone was the CR. And that to me was okay, that's what I had seen for other resignations once I translated the page. Okay, it's done. Like it's done at that time. So I woke up right at 6 and I started writing. And I reached out to, Tom Missel, who is the chief communications officer at Bona's, and I got, immediate word back from him with Dr. DiPiero's statement. And then we jumped in the car, Megan Hall and I had a story in, I think by 7:30. I kind of just went on autopilot that entire day. And we went up to Buffalo. We had gotten ourselves on the media list, so we were invited. But the one thing that was really interesting was Kathy Spangler, who was Bishop Malone's communications director, had sent out the media notice that morning saying one reporter, one photographer / videographer is allowed to come to this press conference due to space. And I had, in the meantime, because we had heard that Bishop Edward Scharfenberger from Albany was going to be the temporary apostolic administrator, I had reached out to Albany just to make a connection with their communications director, just because I wanted to, even if it was a no comment. That's one thing Denny has stressed and the Lees have stressed, and any professor that we've had has stressed. You always go for that no comment, because it just shows that you're getting that other side of the reporting. And so I had reached out to her, and I was following her on Twitter, and I saw that Charlie Specht was saying something along the lines of, the Buffalo Diocese wants to increase its transparency now that we're onto a new beginning. Restrictions on the media like this are just not going to do that for you. And so he tweeted out something, and then 5 minutes later, the communications director from the Albany Diocese, retweets him and goes, "Any reporter is welcome." Completely overruling Buffalo. And so by the time that we had gotten there were like 4 reporters from Channel 4 and 3 reporters from Channel 2, and like it had opened wide up. And we were there. We filed our story from Orchard Park and at Tim Hortons, and we were back to Bona's. And my music professor, the supervising professor, Laura Peterson, who oversaw my capstone, said to me, "I don't care if Bishop Malone sprouts wings. You no more. Don't do anything the next 2 days," because I just was running on complete fumes from that point until the end of the semester. But it was so exciting. I mean, just really cool stuff. I really am going to relish in that and being able to be a part of that. I just, you wish it doesn't happen. It's just sad that it had to happen, but it's just so exciting. There's such a rush that comes over you. I mean, I'm sure well, you're well acquainted with the rush that comes over you when you're in the middle of covering something deep like that.
Right. Although there's never been a better distinction between my college experience and yours than that entire story and just the phrase "checking the Vatican news briefing push alert." And translating, I can't. That's.
But no, I mean that was easy. That wasn't anything out of the realm.
Oh, that's easy, he says.
I wasn't translating it myself. I mean, I was just using Translate and Page by Google Translate.
Okay.
I mean, please, if I could speak fluent Italian, I would. I don't know what I would do, but.
All right. So you listen to the podcast. You know the drill. What's the best thing you've read lately?
Oh man, I was trying to think of this too. Jeff Passan wrote a really good column about the baseball scandal with the Astros and the Red Sox and the Mets, and how beautiful. Yeah, I can't find the words, but he was able to do a really, really good job of just summing up what had been an unbelievable week in baseball. He called it beautiful, yet just poignant but crazy and absurd and scary for the game. But it was a really good summation of what had happened. And then this is reaching back a little bit, but Tim Graham's capsule on the 50th anniversary of the St. Bonaventure Final Four team.
Fantastic. Yeah.
Just tremendous. Just unbelievable work in being able to talk to everybody. That was awesome.
I remember what struck me about Tim's piece was he had information and stories in there that I didn't know, and not that I'm an expert on it, but I've been around that team for a long time, that school for a long time, and still finding new stuff is just a tribute to that, and it was just so well done.
Yeah, I agree. There was one part in there where it was he had reached out to Calvin Murphy, who played at Niagara at the time, mm-hmm. and Calvin said, "Yeah, if Bob and I would have been together, Bob and I really could have won a couple national championships if we were together." and he puts Lanier right under it, saying, "Calvin and I could have never worked together whatsoever." And I was like, it just was a really cool, it's just a great piece by him.
Yeah. All right, Cameron, this has been fantastic, and hope to talk to you again soon sometime.
Thanks a lot, Brian, for having me. This was great.
As always, thanks for listening to The Other 51. You can find show notes for this episode and all our episodes at sportsmediaguy.com on the Other 51 tab. You can subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. I can highly recommend Overcast for this. Our theme music is by Ellie Moritz.